Economic Armageddon started on the 17th of September 2019.
My whole mission, if I could put it that way. So when people say, do I have a job? I don't have a job, I have a mission. The mission has always been to warn the Australian people about this coming crisis before it actually occurs. Now, the whole premise of the crisis is two statistical facts which are indisputable. One is that Australia has the biggest debt bubble, or debt bubbles in Australian history, household debt bubble and foreign debt bubble. And again, just to go back, this was admitted by the Reserve Bank of Australia in 2007, that at that point, bigger than the 1880s and the 1920s, and we are bigger than any time since the arrival of the First Fleet. So that's happening at the same time we've got the biggest debt bubble in the history of the world. More than 250 trillion, 320% of GDP. So today is the day that we say that the crisis has actually started. And it started on the 17th of September 2019, which is a very specific date.
The point I think we should make to the audience here is we're going to do a high-level view today of the reason why we've come to this point.
And we're actually going to explain what has happened, what are the consequences in terms of our analysis, what we've been talking for the last few months, and then what does it mean in terms of the average Aussie who's watching this show.
This is all about liquidity, isn't it? It's all about the engine oil of the financial system.
Yes.
And there was some signs potentially of some freezing, some stalling within the system, and in response to that, the Fed started.
There were banks with money, with cash, who refused to supply cash to the market, even though as the interest rates were going up. And because of that, the Reserve Bank of New York had to step in and pump $53 billion to keep the market under control. Now, the reason why they had to do that was that if these rates stayed elevated at 10%, that would have meant that banks, hedge funds, and a whole bunch of financial institutions would have had to start paying dramatically high interest rates on this big debt bubble. And the concern was a couple of huge institutions would not have been able to sustain those high interest rates, and that would have led to a declaration of insolvency, and that would have led to contagion, and the market would have collapsed. And so since then, the whole name of the game in New York has been to keep these interest rates under control. But to keep them under control, they have done something extraordinary.
Back a decade plus ago, around the GFC, it was again a liquidity crisis that triggered the collapse of banks and then triggered effectively the global financial crisis. So, you can see how close we're getting potentially to another one of those.
The ship has hit the iceberg. The ship is basically, they're pumping money out, they're pumping water out of the ship like crazy to keep it afloat. So far, so good. But at some point, that's going to come to an end. And what we don't know is how long is that going to take. Now, so there's in the next few episodes, we're going to go through a lot more detail because it's going to take a lot of time for people to get their head around what we've just said. But here we are. This is the declaration we've made, and no doubt, people like Mr. Koukoulas have called us house price terrorists because they've said that we were overly pessimistic about housing and property and in terms of household debt. But what we are now saying publicly is that the crisis that we said was coming has started. And what I will say is, when I was in Parliament last week, I had a meeting with an MP who I've had multiple discussions about this economic crisis, and he asked me, well, when's it coming? I said it started. And we went through a little bit about this repo situation. And where we ended the conversation, so he was completely blindsided by this. He didn't even know about the repo crisis and what's happened in the repo market and the plumbing of the financial system or anything like that. And when I stood up to walk out to my next meeting, I said to this Liberal MP, I said, the most dangerous thing is that the Prime Minister and the Treasurer have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. The band is playing. I can hear them. The question is, how long have we got?
That's right.
We'll come back to that, John, in the next episode, I guess.
Yep.
Martin North, John Adams. In the interest of people, we'll see you next time.